Parshas Vayishlach. So we have an interesting, unique series of Maimarim in the beginning of Parshas of the Torah Ohr, Parshas Vayishlach. So if you look, page 3 in these pamphlets, so the first Maimer begins Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim. Then you have a Maimer Vayeshuvu, you see, page 4. Then you have a Maimer Vayemer Yaakov Elokei Avraham. And then on page 6 you have a Maimer Vayakam Balayla. And then on page 8 you have Vayikach Min Abba Biyadei. And that goes until page 13. And then there's another Maimer. So the Sikha from the Frierdiker Rebbe, he brings it down on the Torah one. This Maimer was said, it looks like it was said twice. Once in Tavkuf Samach Beis, which was 1802, or 1801, 1802. And the second time, it was at Shabbos before Yitzis Kislev. Similar to this year. And the second time it was said it was in Tavkuf Samach, so 1804 or 05. But the Maimarim were actually said in one Shabbos. All those Maimarim that we just went through was said in one Shabbos. So the first Maimer, Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim, and the Maimer Vayeshuvu Malachim, and the Maimer Vayemer Yaakov Elokei Avraham, all of that is one Maimer, actually. And that was said, he says it was said in this small shul by the Chatzar. It was on Friday, after Mincha, before Kabbalah Shabbos. Those are those three. Then the second Maimer, the Rebbe said early in the morning, 2 hours before Alesa Shachar. So you can imagine, in the winter time, so it's probably, let's say, in Russia, probably about 5, maybe 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning. That's the next Maimer, Vayakam Balayla. Okay, that's Vayakam Balayla. And then the third Maimer, it actually, the Frierdiker Rebbe says that Maimer had a different Maskell, but that's the Maimer that is in the Torah, Vayakam Balayla. So that's, you see on page 6. And then the third Maimer was said on Shabbos after Mincha, and that was the Vayikach Abba Biyadei, the final Maimer in this series. Yeah, that's just... Now, what's interesting and unique about these Maimarim, they point out, is that it's probably the only place in Torah Ohr and Likutei Torah where the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe points this out, that where the Alter Rebbe takes a whole series of psukim. Usually it's one pasuk, 2 psukim. This is the whole series of psukim in the beginning of our parsha, which illustrate this confrontation, meeting between Yaakov and Esav, and explains all the psukim al pi Chassidus. Now, to really understand the Chassidus, so the Maimarim use terminologies al pi Kabbalah that you have to be familiar with to understand and explain the psukim. So we'll learn the Maimer. There's not a lot of explanation on those concepts, except for you have later on in the Maimer Vayakam Balayla. So you have more. If you see on page 7, so there the Alter Rebbe explains. You see the Maimer, the page 7, the Beis B'chinas B'Avedis Hashem. You see. So there, Alter Rebbe explains this Inyan, the Inyan that Avedis Hashem, The general the theme or the nekuda that goes through all the Maimarim is the difference between Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov represents Eilam HaTikun, and Esav represents Eilam HaToyu. Yaakov Esav wanted to elevate Esav, and he wanted to elevate Esav. He wanted to bring down the eris, high eris of Eilam HaToyu, eris makifim from Eilam HaToyu, and he wanted to do it through Esav, and that's why that was what he was trying to accomplish by sending shluchim to Esav. It didn't exactly work out that way because Esav was not ready, and Esav didn't do the avodah that he had to do, and therefore Yaakov had to do everything. He had to do it all himself. And so everything that is being done in the parasha, everything that looks like a very eventful story that took place was Pi Kabbalah, Pi Chassidus, was Yaakov Avinu harnessing the eris of Toyu. That's the theme of that goes through all these Maimarim. Okay, Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim Lefanav V'Leisav Achiv. Yaakov sent Malachim Lefanav V'Leisav Achiv. So the first diuk that the Alter Rebbe makes is Lefanav. It says Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim V'Leisav. What's Lefanav? So Lefanav, and here lies the key. The Lefanav means that he's trying to access something which is higher than Esav. Higher than Esav. Esav is Toyu, but this is the eris makifim of Toyu. So hine yedua sheYaakov shorshehu b'chinas shema de'elam hatikun. Yaakov's sherish is from Shema. What's Shema? We have many times. Yud Kei Vav Kei. You can spell each letter out, and depending on how you spell the letters, you have a different gematria. So we have 4. Ab, Sag, Ma, Ban. Shem, Ma is when you spell it Ba'alfin, when you spell all the letters, the Vav, and Yud, K, Hey. The Vav, Hey, you spell it with Aleph. And then you have the Gematria 45. But the 45 has to do with Eilam HaTikun, has to do with Bittul, Chachma, and that is the merging together, the system, the harmony of Eilam HaTikun. V'shorish shel Esav v'chenas Eilam HaToyu, and the shorish of Esav is Eilam HaToyu. Now, what's the difference between Toyu and Tikun? So the Alter Rebbe just says one word here. He says, "Va'eres the Toyu heim gdolim me'ed." The eris of Toyu is very, very great, meaning the air is very, very intense, and being that the air is so intense, so the air is not able to be mislabish in the kelim. So what happens when the air can't be mislabish in the kelim? Even nistalkum hakelim. So the air is nostalgic. V'heim b'chinas makifim. So the air is makif because it can't be mislabish in the kelim. What happened to the kelim? So being that the keli couldn't contain the air, so the keli is nishbaru, the keli breaks and falls. So just to illustrate this, the Alter Rebbe doesn't really explain this. Like I said, later on he gives more basis to understand this more about Avodas Hashem. But a mashal that Chassidus gives for Shviras HaKelim is if someone is all of a sudden, like what happened with Sarah Imenu, that she got the psura, she got the news that her son was brought up to the Akedah, and she couldn't handle that. She passed away. When someone gets sometimes someone is told something, they can't handle, they faint or worse. So there was a story of a chassid, of the Tzemach Tzedek, that all his warehouses burnt down. So they told him it burnt down. He fainted, and they tried to revive him. He fainted again. Tried to revive him. He fainted. He kept on fainting. And so the Tzemach Tzedek said to tell him that it didn't burn. They told him he was revived. So how? And they told it. They asked Tzemach Tzedek, "How did you know that it didn't burn?" So he says, because the Eibusher doesn't give something he can't handle. So the fact that he wasn't able to handle that this surah, this news, means that it wasn't the case. But Al Kopanim, what I wanted from the story was the fact that when you have something so bombastic, so overwhelming, so a person can't handle it. So he faints, or worse. Sarah Menu, she passed away. So that's the air. This is the mashal that this gives of the kalim. They couldn't contain the air. They couldn't handle it, and therefore the kalim broke.
Are all the airs of Tayu makifim?
Yeah, it's malachim. That's why they're called malachim. What's pshat makif? Makif means it can't be misabish nakeli. Right? It's not. There's more. The idea of Toyu and Tikkun is a very vast subject, but just the Nikudah that Alter Rebbe is saying here is that the areas of Toyu is air that can't be contained in the keli, and what happens is the keli breaks. What we mean when we say the keli breaks, that the keli itself now becomes ois keli. What it loses. The whole idea of a keli is that it contains the air, and b'meila, once it contains the air, so now it becomes one with the air. It becomes a vehicle. The Rebbe points out regarding this idea that the air and the keli are so united. The Rebbe points out a halacha and the laws of Shabbos, that in Shabbos there's, regarding taking something from one reshus, from one domain to another, so there's shiurim, there's a certain amount of how much you need to do in order to be chayiv, in order to be liable. So if the amount, when we say the amount that we take out is, let's say it's a type of food and it's in a keli, so we don't count the amount with the keli, because the keli is only batal, is only really serving that which is in the keli. So it's not, you don't see the keli as its own entity. It's only something which is completely batal to that which is in it. And that's what a true keli is. A true keli is not its own mitzias, its own entity, but only there to serve and to facilitate that which is in the keli. What happens when the ur goes out of the keli? So now all of a sudden the keli becomes a mitzias. It becomes its own entity. And worse, when the keli breaks, so now what happens is that it's fragmented, and each aspect of the keli now becomes even more of a mitzias. So it goes through this process, or the distancing itself, or becoming more of a mitzias, from being completely batal to the air, and not having its own mitzias, because its whole existence is only a to facilitate the air. Now it becomes its own existence, and now it becomes a mitzias. Another mashal that Chassidus gives for this idea of Shviras HaKelim is the Kelim is oisius. Oisius, letters. So when the letters are in an organized fashion, and they spell a word, and the word makes a sentence. So what are you seeing? You're not seeing the letters. You're seeing the idea that's being conveyed in those letters, in those sentences. When the kalim, meaning when the letters are now unorganized, so now it doesn't facilitate to now to contain within it the ideas that it's conveying. And then it goes even more. When the letter themselves also has ideas that they share, that they contain, independent of the idea that it's conveying. What I mean to say is, if you take the word, for example, Baruch means to bless. Okay, so you have 4 letters in the word Baruch. Now, even if the letters are not organized in the manner that it spells Baruch, and they're unorganized, but each letter still has, the base also conveys an idea by the shape of the letter. Also, there's an explanation in that itself. But what happens when the letter themselves, not only is it not organized in a certain order, but the letters themselves are fragmented. So in other words, you take the base and now you break it into 2 or 3 or 4. So now each piece is completely only a fragment of what was. So now you've completely lost any sense of message that it's there to convey. So what happens? So the keli, now when it becomes so fragmented, so now it becomes a mitzias, and it becomes a mitzias very far. A far distance means completely loses its function. So now that's when you have Esav. The Alter Rebbe will say Esav, the way he comes lamata, when he comes below, is a rasha. In other words, it's far distance and complete hiddenness, concealment from what it was in his sherish in the world of Tayu. So how it came about was because of the fact that the air of Tayu is a different type of air. It's an air that doesn't lend itself to be contained. So once that happens, it's something that is beyond the intensity, is so strong, so that causes this process of shviras hakelim, the breaking of the kelim, the breaking of the oisias. And then the result of that is now you have Esav so far distant from what it was, so concealed that below he's a rasha. It's also brought down, so a similar idea is also regarding animals that are not kosher. So you have on the Merkava, you have Aryeh, which is tzad yamin, and then you have the shir, which is tzad small, right? That's brought down to the ox. The difference between an Aryeh and a shir is the Aryeh, the lion. So when the way that lion is in this, the way it's nishtalshel and descends into this world, so the Aryeh is a chaya, which is not only it's a chaya, it's what's called chayas teref, which is an animal that preys on other animals, and it's not a kosher animal. As opposed to the shir, the ox is a kosher animal. So, l'chura, the aryeh comes from the tzad yamin, so the right chesed. So it should be lamata also. When it comes down below, it also should be a kosher animal. But the idea is because it's such a high air, because it's coming from tzad yamin, so it can't come down lamata. It can't come down lamata in that same way. So it goes to a concealment. That concealment is represented by the fact that the aryeh here below is a chayis teref, and it's not a kosher animal. Mashenkin, the shir, the ox on the left side, because the is a mitzumtzum, it's a which is much more, is a much more condensed and Mamela, when it comes down the mata, it's it remains a kosher animal. Okay, so the same idea. I'm using this also just to illustrate this point. Esav l'mayla was from Olam Hatoyu, was a very high level, higher than Yaakov even. But the way he came, because of this, the air wasn't able to be contained, and the shviras hakelim, now it becomes a mitzias, something that's where it's very hidden. L'chein haya Esav shelamata rasha. Ava mitzad shershe b'makifim detayu harya eres detayu hem l'maylam eres atikon. Commission is by the common base Hashem apasuk vayikach min abba biyadi mincha. Commission is by Gamkin. Parshas told us apasuk re'ereach b'ni, where we had also the Alter Rebbe explains there, talks about the brachas Yitzchak and what Yitzchak wanted to do with Esav and Rivka and Yaakov. V'hine Yaakov chashav. So what was going? So now getting back to the narrative, now that we've illustrated, the Alter Rebbe defined for us who Esav is, and who Yaakov is. So now let's get back to the narrative. Yaakov chashav she'esav nizbarek. Yaakov assumed, just like he did his avodah, which we'll soon see what that was. What was Yaakov's avodah? That was the whole avodah that he did while he was with Lavan in Charan. Yaakov chashav, but he thought, just as he did his avodah, Esav did his. So he was nizbarek kvar. Whatever he needed to do in this world, because of how far he fell, he needed to elevate himself. The chazal l'shersha nailan, that Esav went back to his shirish, but which is, like we said before, b'chenes hamakifim detayu shalifna atikun. Lakach, being that Yaakov thought that Esav did what he needed to do, so Lakach shalach Yaakov malachim lefanav. That's where Yaakov sent malachim lefanav. We said the diuk before lefanav. What does it mean that Yaakov sent to Esav lefanav? Doesn't say Vayishlach Yaakov malachim al Esav. He sent lefanav. What is lefanav? Lefanav mamish. Lefanav means before him. Dahainu abchina shalamayla mimenu b'madrega. Something which is higher than him, higher than Yaakov. Lamayla mimenu b'madrega al Esav achiv seira. To Esav, his brother, the pasuk continues seira. Shehu b'chinas malchin kadmoyin detoyu. That refers to the malachim, the malachim of Toyu, which malchus is makiv canal. Kedei lahamshe b'chinas makifim detoyu, a love that he should be able to bring down the makif from Olam Hatoyu lamata b'tikun. He wanted to bring down these areas into Olam Hatikun, shehu b'chinas er pnimi, v'yor ha'makiv b'pnimi v'yisyachtu yachdav, and the makiv should shine in a pnimius, and they should come together. Now, how can he bring? We just said before that the areas of Toyu are areas, are very high areas. So how could?
And the kelim are broken.
What?
And the
kelim are broken. How can he bring down these such high areas? So in order to explain that, so that later on, the Alter Rebbe says he uses a mashal of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva going into the Pardes. He went. It says that four went into the Pardes. Rabbi Akiva, Ben Zema, right? He says,
Acher.
and Ben Azai,
Acher.
and Acher. Yeah, that's the. So here on page 7, so there he says that all of them, everyone, something happened. Acher went off. He lost his way completely. Ben Azai, it says that he passed away, and Ben Zoma was affected, Nifka. But Rabbi Akiva was nichnas b'shalom v'yatsa b'shalom. He went in peacefully and he went out peacefully. So it's not that Rabbi Akiva chose not to go into the Pardes. Because if he didn't go in the Pardes, then obviously nothing happened to him. We're saying he went into the Pardes, but despite going into the Pardes, he went out b'shalom. Going into the Pardes is synonymous of what we're talking about here, to try to get to the areas, these high areas of Toyu, this level of intensity and bleak gvul that is represented by the makifim of the areas of Toyu. And Rabbi Akiva was able to take that, harness it, and yatsa b'shalom, and he went out peacefully. Why? Because nichnas b'shalom. Because he went in with shalom. This idea of going in peacefully, when the approach of harnessing these areas is in a way of shalom, that like Rabbi Akiva did, then you're able to then the kelim are able to contain it. In other words, when is the kelim not able to contain it? When when the going in is like Ben Azai and Ben Zema, where lechatchila they went in with such a klois hanefesh that all they wanted was to expire. All they wanted was to go higher and higher. When you go in with the kavana, that you realize the Eibishter, there was a kavana, dira b'tachtenim. So even though you go in and you have this tremendous experience, this tremendous klois hanefesh, the yearning that takes place as a result of going into the Pardes, but nevertheless, going into it, you realize the whole idea was to fulfill the kavanah of the Eibishter. So the Eibishter, in other words, the idea, the Toyu is also a world. There's something higher than Toyu. You have Toyu and Tikkun, but there's something higher than Toyu. Higher than Toyu, meaning there's a kavanah, panimius, for all of this. Once you start from the kavanah panimius, which is the nichnas b'shalom, then yatsa b'shalom. So this is what Yaakov Avinu wanted to do with Esav. Yaakov Avinu he was using Esav, through Esav, he wanted to reach these higher areas of Olam HaTorah. Right? That's what the Torah is describing. Vayishlach. And that's why Yaakov commanded them, commanded the Malachim. When you look at the Lashon, the message that he's sending to Esav, express the kavanah of what he was trying to do with Esav. The Hainu. He's saying that I live with Lavan. What does it mean I live with Lavan? Garti. I kept all the mitzvahs. When you live in the Pashtus, what does Lavan care if he kept all the mitzvahs? Yaakov was telling Lavan about where he's holding. I'm ready. Yaakov was telling Esav where he's holding. I'm ready to go to the next level. The Hainu she'edia shekvar nigvar v'nishlam kol seder hatikkun da'atzilus b'tachas ha'shleimus. Yaakov Avinu was saying, I completed the whole Seder of Atzilus. Atzilus is Olam HaTikkun. The others, just a side note, we've been learning the Maimarim in Torah Ohr, the others, their Aveda was a Ruchnistic Aveda. We don't have yet Matan Torah. We'll get to Matan Torah when we get to Parshas Yisrael. We'll get to Matan Torah, going Mitzrayim and going out of Mitzrayim, and that was the last transition going from the Aveda of the others was all a Ruchniistic Aveda, meaning we're talking now the way they are in the world of Atzilus, and even though what the others were in this world, in the physical world, but their whole Aveda is represented not in the way like we have Torah mitzvahs, the way we have after Matan Torah, but the way it's represented is their Aveda was a reflection of what was going on in the spiritual realms, and that's how it was reflected through their Aveda. Only after you have Matan Torah, that's when that's when we were able to actually have a perfect fusion between Gashmis and Ruchnis, Elyonim and Tachtenim. So when we talk about Yaakov Avinu, we're talking about the way his Aveda, in other words, the Olam HaTikun, the way it is in the world of Atzilus, that he finished his Aveda, which, as we learned, the Aveda of Avram Avinu, Avraham Oyavai, was the Indian of Avos Hashem. The Yitzchak had to do with Yiras Hashem, Pachad Yitzchak, and Yaakov was Tiferes. Tiferes, as Al Rebbe will explain later on, Tiferes is what allows, because of what Tiferes is really the key to Olam HaTikun. Meaning to say, the Olam HaTikun, what's the uniqueness of the novelty of Olam HaTikun is that you merge everything merges together. There's a hiskalalus, a complete, a perfect merging of all the different aspects, of all the different extremes. Who has that? Who represents that? That's Yaakovin. That's Tiferes. So when you have that that perfect merging, the hiskalalus, now he's ready to have the epitome of that is to be able to do a hiskalalus to merge Toyu and Tikkun. Till then, Toyu and Tikkun remained separate. Toyu had its what Toyu represents. These are very intense areas, and that caused the Shviras HaKelim, and you see that with the fact that Avraham Avinu, his Aveda, is as much as we describe the Aveda of Avraham Avinu and the Ava, etc., and Yitzchak Avinu, but nevertheless, there was still a Yishmael and there was still an Esau. Only Yaakov Avinu is now he's reaching now to elevate Esau. To elevate Esau means to harness Esau's shirish, which is the makifim of Olam HaToyu, because only Yaakov Avinu was able to do that because he represented Tiferes. And that's the perfect harmony. And that's a reflection or a me'ain of what Torah mitzvahs are. When we have Torah mitzvahs, B'Peil Mamish, in other words, after Matan Torah, so Torah mitzvahs, that's what Torah mitzvahs does. It takes from the world and it brings this perfect, the world, which is this, all these sparks that came from the world of Toyu, and to merge that with Elikus, which is by doing through doing a mitzvah with the physical world. But that's after Matan Torah. Yaakov Avinu was doing his Avodah before Matan Torah. And it's not that that's what paved the way to Matan Torah. So Yaakov Avinu is letting Esav know, he's saying that he finished. In other words, the message that he's sending with the Malachim, that he says in Lavan Garti, I was metakin, everything is b'shleimus. Like we said before, Shema is the Shem is Tikkun. That's the Hiskalus, merging, Bittul. V'zeu vayihi li. And everything is singular. Sher, Chamer, Tzoin, Evet, Shivcha. Right? He only had one sher. So Rashi says it means that the species, but the Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe is explaining that sher v'chamer. This is the idea of tikkun. All of this, that he li sher v'chamer, is because of Lavan Garti. What's Lavan? So Lavan, the Alter Rebbe explained in the previous Maimarim in Parshas Vayetze that Lavan also has a very high sherish. That's Levin Elyon, which is Keser. Yaakov Avinu was able to be mevar everything because of Lavan's sherish. Because he completed everything. Now that he made a perfect keli, he made a tikkun, so now he's able to harness the Eris of Toyu. If he didn't complete what he needed to complete, if Tikkun wasn't finished, then he wouldn't have been able to access the Makifim. In order for the bracha to rest, it can't be an empty space. It has to be complete. Now that he completed the tikkun of what he needed to do, so now it's an asa shlim. That's why he's sending now messengers to Esav, malachim to Esav. What is to find favor in your eyes? What does he want from Esav? The favor is that now that he should be mamshich the eris makifim of Tayo into Tikkun. I transformed the chasheichel in ahira ba'elam hatikun. So now it's a asar shlim. That's what the Zohar describes. It's a complete place. It's a shlemus. He finishes aveda. Now I'm available to be mamshech the makif of Toyu into Tikkun. That was the initial message from Yaakov Avinu to Esav. What happens? The Malachim come back and say, Esav's not ready, he didn't do what he needed to do. Not only that, but he's coming with 400 men. What is the 400 men? That has to do with Gvura and Din. And there's a whole explanation in that, where that's connected with the Arba Meis Kesef that Avram gave to Ephraim. There's a whole beer, which if that's not refined, so that becomes something very, very hidden and concealed and negative, to the point where he's coming with Esav to harm Yaakov. So that's the response. In other words, that's the message that Esav's not ready. So now Yaakov, so Esav's not ready, so now he has to do it himself. Meaning to say, he has to, the Eibishter made that there has to be a sarusa de lasata and a sarusa de leila. You need to arouse from below in order to bring down from above that gilui. So Yaakov Avinu, he wasn't able to do it through Esav, so he was doing it himself. And the Alter Rebbe points out that all the details of what Yaakov did and what the present that he sent, all of that is indicative of Olam HaToyu, the type of animals that he sent, and the way he divided up the camps. All of that has to do specifically with Olam HaToyu. So now he himself is reaching these Eres Makifim of Toyu through that, and that's the continuation of the parsha.